So do you have a team member right now that has you feeling like you're constantly walking on eggshells? Maybe they twist your words, smile to your face as they basically gossip and undermine you behind your back, or snap at you when you ask them to do something very simple. Well, I'm betting that you're dealing with this right now, which is why I'm so glad that you clicked on this video, because what you're dealing with is just not okay. And I'm really sorry that you have to try and lead in conditions like this, because I know it's making your life hard. That's why in today's video, what I want to do is just share with you some tips that will help you navigate this situation. I'll start by breaking down 3 of the most common types of disrespectful employees, and I'll throw out some thoughts as to why the behavior might be happening in the first place, because I believe that when we're trying to solve problems, we should always consider the cause. And lastly, I'll give you some very specific tips to deal with each type that will start shifting the dynamic. Now, before we get into the 3 disrespectful employee types, I do want to say something that might be a little uncomfortable to hear, but needs to be said. So in this video, yes, we're going to discuss the behavior and we're going to get real about it. But I also want us to leave space for some honest self-reflection. You know, it's so easy when dealing with disrespect for us as managers to put all the blame on the employee. And sometimes, yes, they are 100% the problem. But sometimes there's a dynamic at play between both parties that's causing the friction. You know, I've coached hundreds of managers at this point, and I've seen firsthand how sometimes it's also the manager's approach that is part of the problem. So today, we're going to talk about your approach as well. And I'd like for you to just consider if there's the slightest chance that you could be doing something that's contributing to it that you could change. So all I ask is that you stay open to looking at both sides, as I promise that if you do that, you're going to get so much more out of this video. All right, so let's start with one of the most emotionally draining, disrespectful behavior types there is, because of the fact that it has you questioning your own reality. For example, have you ever been in a conversation with a team member where you bring up an observation or even a concern, and their response to you is just complete confusion, like you're the one that has completely lost your mind? They'll say things like, well, I never said that, or that's not what happened, or you're remembering it wrong. And so you end up leaving the conversation, second guessing yourself and thinking, well, maybe I did misunderstand, or perhaps I was just being too sensitive, or maybe I just wasn't being reasonable in the first place. Yeah, this has happened to me a number of times. And this team member or dynamic that you're experiencing is what I call the gaslighter, where they'll deny saying something that you know for a fact they said, and or they'll twist the narrative so much that you're so confused and are pointing the finger at yourself for overreacting. It's really frustrating, right? And it can really play with your brain and your emotions. Now, what causes this type of gaslighting? Maybe they just genuinely have a different recollection of what was said, right? Sometimes it's not malicious, it's just simply a different interpretation of the events. Or maybe they don't feel safe admitting that they're wrong, so their go-to move is to deflect and just rewrite history. Or maybe this is just a pattern that has worked for them in the past, right? They know that if they make you doubt yourself, that they don't have to take any accountability. But this type of response can also surface when a manager is vague and unclear in general, because it creates confusion and it opens the door for them to rewrite what was said and leaves room for different interpretations. It can also come up when we deliver feedback or observations in an accusatory tone. So of course they hear it as an attack, and then their defense mechanism kicks in and immediately they go into deflection mode. So sometimes we're also inadvertently setting the stage for this type of response. Now the question becomes, well, what do we do about it? Well, one of the things that you can control is how clear you are, right? Let's not be the ones who now are creating the conditions for this. One of the practices that you can adopt to be clear is documentation. Start keeping a record of all your conversations where you're like, okay, here's what we discussed, here are next steps, and here's what we agreed upon. And, you know, I tell all my clients that they should always send a follow-up email with those details. That way, when the person comes back later and says, well, I never agreed to this, or I didn't say that, you can say, well, actually, here's the email that we both agreed to. And side note, the tone of that email should not be confrontational or punitive, right? The goal should be alignment. If you send it with that tone of being confrontational, then that's going to impact the dynamic more and make things worse. Over time, though, documenting things will actually shift their behavior, because now you're creating conditions where clarity, alignment, and accountability are just part of how you work together. Now, the next type of disrespectful employee is really sneaky because of the fact that it's subtle. So this is a person who is so nice to your face, but there's this touch of defiance happening. So they're questioning things that you say and undermining your authority to other team members. So they'll say things to other team members like, well, I don't know why Mindy wants it this way, but hey, this is what she wants, so I guess we'll do it. Or they're pushing back on everything you ask them to do, but because it's done in a way that is polite, you feel like you don't have enough to call them out. And listen, I'm not saying that people shouldn't push back. Like, I like working with tigers, so I'm okay if people push back. But what I'm talking about is this person, they don't want to work with you. It's like they want to work on opposing teams, and all their actions indicate that they're not on the same team with you. It's really frustrating, right? Especially with this one because it's so subtle, but you can definitely feel it. So let's talk about why this might be happening, because there are a lot of reasons for behaviors like this. So number one, maybe for whatever reasons, they don't trust your leadership or direction. Maybe they fundamentally disagree with you on a lot of things, which is not bad, but they don't know how to communicate it in a way that's productive. Maybe you were promoted over them and they're dealing with some resentment and they don't know how to process that. Maybe their previous manager was one that didn't listen, so they learned to work around authority or just have issues with authority in general. Maybe they learned that when they speak up, nothing changes, so why bother? Now, also on the flip side, as a manager, we might be contributing to this behavior by maybe doing things like shutting down disagreement or getting defensive as soon as someone questions our decisions or our thought process. So what happens is they instantly learn that they're not safe to be direct with us, so instead, they passively do so. Or going back to the promotion thing, yes, the resentment is on them, but it was also on us to address the elephant in the room. So if we never did that, and have just been expecting that it would go away on its own, then we can't be surprised when resentment keeps showing up sideways. Also, what can cause this behavior is an inconsistent manager, because inconsistency tells the team that they can't rely on you, therefore they shouldn't trust you. So what do you do, right? What do you do if you are dealing with this behavior? Well, you have to address the issue directly. And I know that can feel scary, especially with someone who is passive aggressive, because they're really good at making you feel like you're the problem. But it has to be done for your sanity and for the good of the team. So like we talked about earlier, document what you're seeing. And I would say look for 3 examples of this behavior and then talk to them one-on-one about it. Right? Talk to them about the observations you've made and use those examples as clear evidence, for lack of a better word, of what you're seeing. I like 3 so that if the person pushes back on one, then you can go, well, what about this? Because they can't push back on all 3. And if they do, then either the examples you're giving aren't clear or they are very committed to avoiding accountability, in which case that is a topic for a different video. The key in this conversation is to stay calm and curious, not accusatory, right? Let's not attack, but instead stay open and create a bridge for honest communication. All right, so the third type of disrespectful employee is so obvious because of the fact that it's so overt, right? It's the person who gets agitated by everything you ask them to do. So maybe when you assign them a task, they'll snap back at you and say, well, are you serious? I have 10 other things on my plate right now. I can't believe you're giving me this to do. Or maybe they raise their voice at you every single time something is said that displeases them, or they just get visibly agitated or confrontational about things. They just have this prickly edge to them whenever you interact, which leaves you bracing yourself essentially for an outburst. Now, this is very triggering in so many ways. And if you're a people pleaser like myself, then your instinct might be to back down or avoid conflict with them altogether by not even asking them to do anything because you already know what you're going to hear. Now, this is understandable, but it's not okay, right? It's not okay for you to be changing your expectations based off of their mood, right? It's not okay for them to be behaving like that. So let's talk about why this might be happening, because again, this is, a symptom. So let's talk about the root causes. So maybe the person is going through something personally, right? So they're stressed, they're overwhelmed, and it's spilling over into how they communicate at work. Doesn't make their behavior okay, but it does give us some context. Other times, I've seen this behavior when a team member is tired of their manager breathing down their neck and questioning everything they do. And they're pushing back because they feel disrespected and don't know how to communicate it professionally. Or maybe they just lack emotional regulation, right? They don't have the skills to manage their emotions in a professional setting. So when they're frustrated, it comes out as aggression. And sometimes they just fundamentally disagree with the direction you're taking things, or they're at capacity themselves, and your request feels like the last straw. And again, they don't know how to communicate it professionally. For this one, I do want you to consider if you might be micromanaging them. Like, be real. Are you hovering over them? Are you not giving them enough space? Because if you are, then their reaction could be a symptom of that. The other thing you want to consider is, are you giving enough context for your ask? Or are you just piling on tasks without explaining why it matters or how it fits into the bigger picture? And also, I want you to consider if you've built any trust with this person, because if you haven't, and you're just coming at them with demands, then of course you're going to get pushback in a way that you're not going to like. Now, again, I am not excusing poor communication. I'm simply trying to see it from two perspectives to get the other side, right? But if this person is just like that, like, what do you do? If that's just the type of individual that they are, what do you do? Well, beyond analyzing yourself and making necessary adjustments, I do believe that asserting boundaries is also necessary. You know, I remember my mentor once told me, like, Mac, if you backtrack in the moment, then that person thinks that they've won. And now you've taught them that it's okay to communicate with you like this, so don't let it happen. So what I started to do is be a mirror in that moment. So I would assume that the person didn't know that they were responding like this and that they were raising their voice or their tone, and I would just assertively say, hey, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but you're raising your voice. Or, hold on, feels like we need to reset how we're communicating, because right now we are not communicating. Or, I hear that you're frustrated, and at the same time, I'm going to need you to bring down your voice. And then later, when things have calmed down, that's when you can have a conversation with them about the dialogue between the two of you, right? You can tell them honestly, hey, when I speak to you, I always speak to you with respect. But what I've observed in our interactions is that always doesn't happen when you're speaking with me. So help me understand why that's the case. Listen, I know that this is not always easy to do, especially when emotions are high. And that's why I've given my students in the Accelerator program a handful of de-escalating scripts that can help them in the moment to bring the conversation down. But the point is, you must set the boundary, because if you don't, you're teaching them that this behavior is acceptable. And like I said, it is not acceptable. You know, if there's one thing I want you to take away from this video, it's this. You don't have to accept disrespect, but know that disrespect isn't as simple as saying that they're a bad employee. Because even if they are 1,000% the issue, you're still the only person that can change that by perhaps making a decision that you've been avoiding in the first place. And that's why I actually want you to watch this video here next, where I'm going to walk you through a checklist or a series of questions to consider that will help you determine what's the best call to make given the current situation you're in.